Hi, I'm Lauren from LSP Actions. In this quick tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can add a texture overlay in Photoshop by hand. I'm using Photoshop Creative Cloud, so let's dive in. First thing you're going to want to do is open your image in Photoshop. I prefer solid backgrounds, ideally in a mid-tone to not too dark, not too light, like a Goldilocks zone. These are going to be great for textures, but I'm also going to show you how to add to darker images and lighter images too. So after downloading the texture, locate it in your downloads folder, and you can either drag and drop these over your image in Photoshop, or you can come up in Photoshop to File, Place Embedded, locate the texture file on your computer and add it that way. A third way you can do this, as with everything in Photoshop, there's more than one way to do the same thing. You can add it to your libraries. So for example, I'm going to create a new library, call it textures, and we can add our images in, our texture images. Let's add these couple of textures in here. And you can see they're loading into the library now. So we can just drag and drop these from the library. So you can do it several different ways. Once your texture's in Photoshop, it's going to be a solid image over yours. So the first thing you're going to want to do is kind of resize this to fit your image. So I'm just resizing this out, making sure it covers everything, and hit OK. And we can see in our layers panel, this is just a solid block. If you can't see your layers panel, come up to Window, hit Layers. Now we don't want to use a texture overlay as a full background replacement. Let me show you what happens if we do this. So I'm going to select our background layer. On Creative Cloud, you can select Subject. On older versions of Photoshop, you'll have to add a mask yourself. I'm just going to invert this selection. So we selected everything else apart from our subject, the background, and add a layer mask. So now we can see we've added the textures to the background. It just doesn't look great. It's too solid. We don't want to do a full background replacement. So here, where it says normal, this is your blend mode. Make sure you're on the texture layer. And you can see now we have these different blend modes for our image. I normally go overlay or soft light. I'm going to go overlay for this image here. And you can see we've got a little more selecting to do on this ladder area. In Creative Cloud, on the selection area, I'm going to use the object selection tool and just draw rough outlines over the areas we want to select. You can hold down Shift to add more than one selection. So you can see here I'm just trying to select this ladder. We're getting there slowly. Oh, not sure why my image is bouncing around all over the place. And you could hold down Alt to deselect certain areas. Sometimes you have a fiddly selection, it takes a while, but this object selection tool is actually really, really great. So I'm just holding down Alt just to get these selections as best that we can, and holding down Shift to add. Now on the layer mask, I can grab a brush. I'm going to set it to black. Oh, sorry, my brush is very, very big. I'm going to set this to black because black means hide. So on the texture layer, I'm painting over this selection in black because we want to hide the texture on these areas. If you're in another program, an older version of Photoshop, for example, or even in Creative Cloud, sorry, my dog's barking in the background. As with all selections, you are going to want to zoom in. If you're doing this in an old version of Photoshop, you do this from the start. If you're doing it in Creative Cloud, you can now zoom in. Most of the work has been done for you. You can grab a black brush to hide the texture from certain areas, or a white brush to paint it in. Layer masks are like a lotto scratch card. White means hide, black means show. Oh, sorry. Reverse that. Black means hide, and white means show. You can switch quickly between a black and white brush on your keyboard by pressing the X key. So I like to do this when editing. And you soon get into a really quick flow of it. Now, if you're lucky, your image will be really good to select and you won't have to do any of this, but it really depends on your image and how well Photoshop reads your image. So I'm just going around the feet. What you can also do with textures, and this is something I like to do, not on skin areas, but other areas of your image, I like to slowly blend them in together, because doing that way means that you can get a nice blend without any harsh edge lines. So I'm going to do that in a moment once we've got our base selection done. There's a couple of little areas of grey still showing through here, so I'm just going to... You can hit the square bracket keys to shrink your brush. Knowing your keyboard shortcuts is really important when you're editing in Photoshop. On our LSP Actions website, lsp-actions.com, you can grab our free keyboard shortcuts cheat sheet if you wanted to. Okay, so we've now got quite a nice cutout, but the texture is looking very harsh compared to our original background. So on the blend mode, I'm going to come down, change the blend mode to soft light. Very similar to overlay, a little bit less harsh. I'm also going to grab a white brush, make it nice and soft, with a nice low flow. If you're new to Photoshop, this might seem a little bit complicated, but seriously try it out. And before you know it, you'll be editing super quickly. We've all got to go through the tryout stage. So what I'm doing with the white brush on the texture mask, I'm just dabbing it in very gently around our subject. Not on the skin. We don't want any texture on the skin, but certainly around the hair. We can just blend this in, dab it in a little bit. And there we go. Before and after. And the great thing is, once you've got your layer mask now, you can use this for other textures. So for example, the stone texture, cloud cotton, I'm just going to drag this one in. This is a completely different vibe, a completely different texture. So I'm just going to resize that one. Change the blend mode. And you can hold down Alt, click the mask, and you can drag it up and it's going to duplicate that mask again to the layer. So you don't have to mask again once you've done it once. You can unclip the layer and resize this differently without changing the mask now if you wanted to. Really, really great. You can also stack textures up together. Because they're in blend mode, it's all like layers of tracing paper. You can stack them up to get a completely different look. So let's go ahead and add a texture again to a different image here. Again, perfect background for a texture. I'm just going to add the master's texture in. We're going to go a little bit quicker now because we've already covered the methods. Going to change the blend mode to overlay, select our background, select subject, select inverse, which means everything but our subject is selected, and add this to our mask. Now something else I'd like to show you, now you can see here, oh my god, sorry, my brush is huge again. We've not got the best selection around this. It's actually a low resolution image. The higher resolution your image, the better, because Photoshop is going to be able to pick out the details a little bit better. But I do like to show you with images that are going to have a few issues that you might come up against, so I can kind of show you as much as possible. So I'm just masking in a little more. Now I want to show you how we make a perspective on the background, because texture is flat. But you can see originally this image obviously has a floor and a wall. So unlink the layer mask, which means you can independently now move either of these around your image. If you've placed your texture in, you're going to want to right click and choose rasterize. It was a smart object. You can't kind of edit areas on a smart object so easily. I'm going to grab the marquee tool and make a selection where the background would be. Control or Command T, this brings up free transform, right click, perspective. And I'm going to drag this out, and you can see we've got a perspective coming just on that area. I'm going to drag it all the way over here, which means our canvas gets kind of shoved out the way. And hit OK. And now we have a floor. a floor and a wall. You see that? You can play with the blend mode. You can play with the opacity of the texture. There's other blend modes too. Multiply is going to make the texture very dark. Screen is going to make it very light. Lots of different blend modes you can play with. Overlay or soft light really are the ones, I think, for texture overlays. So let's go ahead and add a texture to something a little different. This image is very, very white. So let's add our stone cloud texture for this one. I'm going to change the screen mode. If we change it to overlay, we can't see the texture. You can only see it on her legs or soft light. That's not going to work. For a very, very white background, you want to change the blend mode to multiply. But that is going to darken the background. So I'm going to grab the opacity and bring it down a little bit. Now let's grab our subject, select. Subject, if you're in an old version of Photoshop, you're going to need to add the layer mask first and paint on it. Here's your layer mask down here. Paint on it with black or white manually. Now another thing we can do with our texture is edit our texture. You can add adjustments as clipping masks, but because it's a smart object, I'm going to come up to Image, Adjustments. Let's add a Levels layer. This is just going to edit the texture, so we can make the texture really bright, we can make it really dark. So I'm just going to bring up the histogram a little bit here. To make it brighter, we want some of the natural whites of the image showing through. And hit OK. And there we go. Before and after. We've added the texture to a white background. Let's add a texture to a darker background. These images here, by the way, beautiful images by Brandt. Let's add this to a darker background. And a resize to fit. And again, our normal blend modes of overlay and soft light, they will show a little bit on the lighter areas, but not very much. But if we hit screen, it's now very bright. I was going to show you quickly as well, actually. So I'm so used to just going select subject. If you have to do this manually, click on your texture, add a mask, grab your brush, set to black. You'll be changing your brush size depending on, the areas you need to mask, and you're going to have to reveal your subject manually. This is the way we had to used to do it, but now with Creative Cloud, it makes it all a lot easier. Because in Creative Cloud, you can just click on your image, select subject, inverse the selection, and add this. So we've added our texture in now. I'm just going to unlink that as a screen overlay. It's very, very bright. So I'm going to come on the opacity and bring that down a little bit. Because we don't want to lift the background too much. You don't want too much discrepancy between the original and your subject. So before and after, we've added a texture in. We can do the same with this one. Resize to cover your image. Change the blend mode to screen. If it's a dark background, let's just alt-click that layer mask. Now that's very, very bright, so I'm just going to bring that opacity down. And we can layer these up as well, if you wanted more than one texture. So that's adding textures in Photoshop, before and after, by hand. If you own any of our LSP texture overlays from the LSP Actions website, they actually come with Photoshop actions that help you apply them. So they select your subject for you in Creative Cloud. They create all the masks you need, plus a few extra really clever things that you can use when applying textures to get that beautiful fine art feel to your image. There's lots of texture packs to choose from, each one created with a fine art feel in mind. So I hope you love them. Please do post in the LSP Actions editing group for Facebook, because I would love to see what you're doing with these. Nothing makes me happier than seeing your results with these things I've created for you. So enjoy, happy applying textures. You can also ask questions in the group as well. We're all there to help you get the best out of your editing. Merry Christmas. I'm Lauren. Thanks for watching.